I'm hoping that if the inability to black out they might help with things.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Lovely winter's day, lovely Christchurch winter's day. Aren't we lucky? Now, very few announcements at the beginning. The questionnaire, I understand that the returns are coming in well. Just those of you who are able to do it, unlike myself, able to do it online easily, go ahead and do it that way. But those who can't, there are hard copies at the foyer of the church, and if you'd like to pick up one of those and fill it in and either leave it here today or bring it back next week, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you. Question time at the end of the lecture. We will hand the mic around rather than having to go to the back of the church for the questions. There is no lunch next Friday. I think that's right, committee, isn't it? And the final thing is, keep your masks on and your cell phones off. So I'll ask Paul to introduce our speaker. Thank you very much.
Morning, and kia ora to those who are watching us online. First of all, I must declare an interest in today's talk because I am one of 4 shareholders in Money Time, and I'm delighted that 2 other of the shareholders, joining Neil, Alex Lamb over there, and Paul Davis sitting next to my wife Anne, they are just magicians as far as I'm concerned. They're a different generation to me, and I really can only contribute because I'm a school teacher of past interests and experience, while these people are just wizards when it comes to programming and business deals. So that's just fantastic working with these people. Neil, 4 years ago, started trialing something called Money Time, which he's going to tell you about. I went to some of the trials with year 7 and year 8 students. And then I said, Neil, you're on to a winner. And right now, our Kiwi innovation has been recognized worldwide. He'll tell you more about that in a moment. His story. Neil was born in Dunedin and supports the Highlanders. Shame. He attended Waihi Preparatory School for Boys near Timaru before going to be head boy of Otago Boys High. It so happens that his son was head boy of Christ College a couple of years ago. His first role after leaving Otago University with a BCom LLB was with Fletcher Challenge in Wellington, but when his father died suddenly in 1990, he jumped in to help his mother, Annie, to set up Annie's wine bar and restaurant in the Arts Centre in Christchurch. Neither he nor Annie had any experience in restaurants, but with the help of some wonderful staff, managed to grow into one of the most popular and successful restaurants in Christchurch. After 5 years, Neil sold his shares to Annie and set up his own business consultancy. Over the next 20 years, he assisted hundreds of companies and presented more than 500 workshops nationwide in the NZTE's Enterprise Training Scheme. He also enjoyed half a dozen marketing roles in sectors as diverse as apparel, wool insulation, RFID technology, and bringing construction workers into Christchurch from the UK after the earthquakes. However, in 2017, he decided to act on a long-held desire to do something that would benefit a large number of people and leave some sort of legacy. Not having the funds to gift another Hagley Park, and concerned his children's generation are growing up with limited financial literacy, he set about developing Money Time. It's an online financial literacy program for kids. After 18 months of research and development and testing, Money Time was launched into New Zealand primary schools in June 2018. The program clearly met a gap as it was quickly adopted and has now been used by more than 50,000 students in nearly half the primary schools in years 7 and 8 in New Zealand. Neil and his shareholders, my good gentleman over there, always intended to provide the program internationally and are pleased to be able to have it set up already in South Africa, Australia, United States. I was very happy to be involved in the conversion to those particular, well, to South Africa in particular, and we have one lined up for the UK. Neil is delighted to be here today to share with you his experience in providing education in the digital era. Over to Neil. Okay?
Good morning, everyone. I've just recently come out of lockdown as of this morning after my bout of COVID, so hence the mask right until the last minute. And if you would like to keep your distance afterwards or keep a perimeter around me, I will understand. Thank you very much, Paul, for the introduction and for inviting me to speak this morning. This series of talks is about education in the digital era. I didn't know anything about this 5 years ago. I had absolutely no idea. I went to school and had similar experiences to what you had. We had textbooks and basically did what the teacher told us, and that was the limit of my learning experience. So this whole digital education thing has been a real education for me. So what I thought I'd do today is just give you a quick look at what a digital program looks like for kids in schools, and then tell you the story about how it came about. So what is Money Time? It's an online financial literacy program. It's web-based, which means you access it via a browser like Safari or Google, so you need a desktop or a laptop or a tablet to be able to do that. And it's available in primary, intermediate and secondary schools throughout New Zealand. As Paul mentioned, we've had 50,000 students use the program now. We're in over 700 schools throughout the country. And we also have a version that is available for families so their children can use the program at home via subscription. So how does it work? I thought I'd show you this quick video, which probably can explain it a little better than I can, succinctly in a relatively short space of time. Children these days are growing up with limited financial literacy. This means they grow up not knowing how to manage their money. They learn through trial and error, often making life a lot more difficult than it has to be. That's where we come in.
Money Time is a financial literacy program for students in years 6 to 8. The program steadily builds their financial know-how to the point where they understand how to grow their money and manage it wisely. The lessons are intertwined with a fun, interactive game where they learn by making their own financial decisions. As a teacher, you don't have to be a financial genius. You simply let Money Time do the teaching for you. We know you're short of time, so there is minimal prep time required, and quizzes are marked automatically. And unlike other programs, Money Time regularly assesses student improvement, so you can see clear evidence of the program's effectiveness. The end result is a resource that is stimulating and fun for students, effective and easy to use for teachers.
If you're serious about teaching your class financial literacy, why not contact us for a trial today, which you can do with your class or in your own time. After just 15 minutes, you'll know you're onto a winner. Emma. It's getting very excited, that video. There we go. So just to give you a little bit of a deeper dive into what the program looks like, this is a screen that the student sees when they're logged into the program. We've got, if I do that, can I? No, no, I'm not going to do that. There we go. Sorry, Emma, there we go, okay. So at the top, there's students' net wealth. This is what we're trying to get them to maximise as they go through the program. There are a bunch of modules that they get to do. There's 30 lessons that range from earning, saving and budgeting through to borrowing money, buying property, investing and business. And for every correct question they get in a multi-choice quiz, at the end of each module, they get money paid into a virtual bank account. Up there on the top left is their everyday account. And as they go through the program, there's a bunch of things that unlock that they can spend their money on or use their money for. The first thing they can do is they can transfer it into a savings account and earn interest. They can then, I think it's perhaps on the next screen. Oh no, that's what a module looks like. So I'm going to go. They can spend their money on their avatar. They choose their avatar at the beginning of the program, and then they can dress their avatar up. There's half a dozen shops that unlock as they go through the program. Each shop has cooler gear, but it costs more, which is a nice sort of parallel with life, so you can appreciate. And they can also invest their money, and there's half a dozen investments that unlock as they go through the program. They can start by investing in their education. They start the program as a gardener, earning $600 per module, but as they go through the program, there are more jobs that unlock. They can be a physical trainer, or a graphic designer, an accountant, a doctor, and ultimately they can end up being an astronaut, earning megabucks, but it costs them money to buy the qualification. The better the qualification, the better the job, but also it costs them more to get the qualification. So that's another parallel with real life. And what we're trying to do is teach them or give them the experience of making financial decisions that are just like what they're going to have to make out in the real world. And we want them to get the knowledge and the experience of being able to make those decisions in a safe environment, in their school environment, where if they make a mistake, they'll learn from it, but they won't necessarily suffer for it. So just going back a slide or two. Sorry, Emma, I'm going to do this to you again. This is what a lesson slide looks like. Essentially, going to do it again. There we go, that's what a lesson slide looks like. Essentially, we explain the concept. On the left-hand side, there's some sort of interaction. They've got to solve an equation, or they've got to click and drag a word to complete a sentence, or they might have to answer a true-false question. In this stage, in this slide, they have to put in what the phone is going to cost them each week. And the two helpers on the right-hand side are there to explain things in more detail, to give examples, or just to have a bit of banter back and forth between them. I'm a great believer that people learn better when they're having fun, and if there's a bit of humour in the program, then that means that the kids are enjoying it. And so there's a fair bit of banter back and forth between these two. And I tell you what, it's quite interesting writing a program where you have to modify your own thought of what's funny into what's funny for a 12-year-old. And that was quite a long time ago for me, so that was a good challenge. So here's another example of what's on a screen. We use calculators within Money Time. Obviously, calculators are used widely by children now. In fact, I imagine most kids probably can't add anything over 100 in their heads, so we let them use calculators in the program. So it's a fun program. It covers, as I mentioned, that range of personal finance topics. We want to give them a really broad foundation for their personal finance. We start from the premise that they don't know anything about financial literacy. The only thing that we assume they know is what money is, and then we just take it from there and just build it up step by step. We want to expose them to these things like property and investing in business at this early age. You might think that 10 or 12 years old is pretty young to be learning this sort of stuff, but what we want to try and do is normalise it for them. Right at the beginning of their financial journey, this is what they can expect as they go through life. As they start earning more money and getting more money and perhaps having some more responsibilities, this is what their financial journey could look like, so that it normalises for them. They learn the vocabulary, they understand the concepts, so when they actually get to the point when they are going to be borrowing money to buy a house, or they are thinking about investing in shares, or they are thinking of starting a business, it's quite normal. This is what people do. It's not scary. I remember being terrified about the concept of what a business was. My father was managing director of a builder and hardware supply company, and he would go off to work each day, and he'd come back, and he'd never tell me what he did, but he worked in business. And it was kind of like this big, scary thing, a business. Ooh. So what I wanted to do in this program is just lay it out for the kids. Well, this is what a business does. This is what a profit and loss equation looks like. This is what's the difference between retail and wholesale. What's the difference between a manufacturer and a retailer? Very simple stuff that for us now is very normal, but for kids, often they have no idea until somebody tells them. So, as Paul mentioned, we've been successful here in New Zealand, and we're now promoting the program around the world. And so I just wanted to share with you what makes it good and what makes a good digital resource for kids, not necessarily just money time or financial literacy. But first of all, we've made it self-directed. And the reason we did this is twofold. One is to get a high amount of engagement with the kids. They work through it in their own pace, at their own time. So they're in control. They're not being dictated to or told when to stop, when to start, when to turn the page. They're in control. And the second thing about being self-directed is that teachers don't have to know financial literacy for the kids to be able to do this. Let's face it, very few of us were taught financial literacy when we were young. I certainly wasn't. Certainly most teachers haven't been either. And so their financial knowledge or their personal financial knowledge is not great often, and so they're reluctant to or embarrassed to or reluctant to teach financial literacy, and so we've made it easy for them. We do the teaching within the program. The second thing we did was gamify it, and I showed you how they can spend money on various different things, make different financial decisions. What that does is it creates a high amount of engagement, and we all know that the more engaged you are in doing something, the more likely you are to enjoy it, and if you enjoy it, you're much more likely to understand it and want to keep doing it. So that's why we've gamified it. It's a very strong trend in learning programs globally, and we're able to do that now in the digital era. With the use of software, we can introduce gamification relatively easily and make it fun for the kids. The third thing we had to do was make sure it was very easy to set up, and Alex was a fantastic mentor for me here. I just thought, you just give them an opportunity to create an account and log in and away you go. But it's not as simple as that. You have to put yourself as a designer in the shoes of a user and go, what steps do they think they have to take to set up an account and get into the program and get going? And I, to be honest, had not used a lot of digital programs prior to designing Money Time. And to be honest, I still find it a bit difficult getting logged on to things or creating accounts or remembering passwords, that sort of thing. And so I was probably just the right person to be designing this, because I had to think, how can we make this bulletproof so that somebody that has no idea how to create an account can create an account, get going on Money Time. So we've made it easy to set up. I've actually already talked about the interaction. That's absolutely critical. So there's lots of, every third or fourth screen within the program, we have interaction required from the children. So it keeps them involved and engaged. And then the fifth thing we did was include parental involvement. Within there's 30 lessons within the program that the students do in a classroom, but there are also 13 modules that they can do at home with their parents or their grandparents. And what these do, they reinforce the lessons that they've done in the class, but they also act as a way of normalising the content and enable them to put it into real life context. So for example, we get the children to write a CV for their parent or their grandparent. We get them to apply for that person's job or a dream job. We get them to go online shopping for a pair of $70 shoes. No more. It's got to be $70 or less. And they do that together. They buy a house together. They figure out how much they're going to have to supply for a deposit, and then they've got to use a calculator to figure out what the monthly or weekly payments are going to be if they buy that house. So it's a wonderful opportunity for parents, grandparents to interact with their kids and give them some real life context as to around personal finance. So how good is it? I think one of the things we measure ourselves by is the effectiveness of the course. Does it actually improve children's knowledge? So we have quizzes at the end of each module, but we also have pre-tests and post-tests regularly throughout the program. These are multi-choice quizzes as well. And so we get them to do a pre-test at the start of a topic. They do 3 or 4 modules, and then they get to do a post-test at the end of the topic. And they're exactly the same questions, and the difference in their scores clearly indicates how much they've learnt by having done the topic. And I was absolutely delighted to find that initially it was 32%, and then we rewrote some modules. We now produce an average 44% increase in knowledge across all the kids that are doing the program. That's from decile 1 up to decile 10. Can you imagine if you were starting on something that you knew nothing about or knew very little about, and somebody told you that you would know at least half as much more by the end of the course, how excited would you be? Pretty excited, I would hope, because that's a pretty big increase in knowledge, and so we're absolutely delighted that we're achieving these sorts of results. As Paul mentioned, we've received a number of awards recently for the program. These are actually all international awards, which is really exciting. The top two are specifically for financial literacy. And then the third one, the 100, that's actually a global organisation for just innovation in education. And we've been shortlisted for one of their top 100 programs globally. So by that account, we seem to be doing okay. So now the story about how Money Time came about. I'm delighted that my three other shareholders are here today. There's Alex on the left, myself, Paul, whom you know, and Paul Davis. So how it came about was I've been doing my marketing consultancy for 20 years. I was starting to look around for something else to do. I needed another challenge, and I was sitting with Paul Davis at a Christ College new entrance dinner, and we were talking about what we were each doing, and he said, I'm looking at investing in businesses, and I said, well, actually, I am too. I think I'd quite like to do that as well. So we swapped notes and found that we were looking for similar sorts of businesses. His ones had a couple more zeros on the end than mine. But we agreed to meet regularly and compare notes. Well, after the second meeting, we both agreed that there was a lot of rubbish out there. There wasn't anything worth buying. And he said, why don't you do something of your own? And I said, I'd really like to, but I just don't know what I'd do. And he said, well, what about financial literacy? He said, I reckon that's something that would be worthwhile teaching kids. And I said, yeah, well, I agree with you. I think it would be really worthwhile, but why are you suggesting that to me? I don't have any finance qualifications. I've never taught kids, and I don't know anything about software. And he said, oh, well, I reckon you could do it. Thank you, Paul, for your vote of confidence. So I went away and did a whole pile of research and found that there was not a lot going on. There was another program here in Christchurch called Banker, who many of you probably have heard about. And we took a look at Banker and thought, well, that's great. They've done a really good job there, but there's quite a few things that they could have done better. And I thought, well, if we're going to do our own program, then we'll just use that as a starting point and just make a better program. So that was fine. But then it was like, okay, well, how do you make a software program if you've just got the idea and you've got a clean slate? And so I said, well, I can only do this if I've got someone to do the software for me. And he said, Paul said, I know just the guy for you. And so he introduced me to Alex. Excuse me. And I met with Alex, and Alex sort of nodded his head wisely, didn't say much. And then he gave me a few things to think about, and I went away, came back the second meeting, talked about those few things, and then he said, yep, let's do it. And I said to Alex, you know that I don't know anything about any of this. Why are you agreeing to do this? And he said, because Paul thinks it's a good idea. Which speaks to the esteem that Alex holds Paul, as do I. Now, so I had an idea of what a child might like to experience, but I had no idea how to put it into a design. So Alex introduced me to a young fellow called James McIntyre, who'd just come out of UB, the design school here in Christchurch. And I sat down with James and said, James, this is what I'm thinking of doing. And he said, yeah, no sweat. And he just started mocking up all these different screens of what it could look like. And James and I met together regularly for about 3 months, just hashing out how the thing would look, how it would work, what it would look like. And he was brilliant because he was only 19. And so he's just a young fellow, digital native, and he was a big gamer. So he really understood the whole gaming side of things. And so he was able to put onto a screen what I basically had in my head in terms of an experience. We got that set up using some software that enables you to mirror what a program's going to look like. And I started testing it in schools. And I'm very grateful for the teachers at St Margaret's College, St Michael's Church School, Heaton and Selwyn House for allowing me access to their students to test the program on. And I did 121 one-to-one tests with students testing through the program. The first 10, 20 were pretty stressful because I'd never done anything like this before. I was sitting looking at the student, watching what they were doing on the screen, looking at their facial expressions, looking at their body language, and I realised after 20 tests that I needed to start again. It was too hard for them. I had assumed that they knew more than what they knew, so I had to go back and start from the premise that they didn't know anything and build it up from there. So you might think those first 3 months were a waste of time, but they certainly weren't, because it was so important that I got those first 3 modules right, because we all know if your initial experience is a positive one, then you want to keep doing it. So it was absolutely critical that I made sure that those first 3 modules were ones that they understood and that they enjoyed. So after all the testing, I handed over to Alex and said, knock yourself out. I don't know how you do this, but can you turn this into a software program? Alex has a team of software developers in Kuala Lumpur who we used, very talented bunch of guys, and they have essentially created a world-class program out of the design that James and I did. And we launched it into schools in June 2018, and we had 40 schools sign up within the first 2 weeks, which was just such a relief. I can't tell you what a relief that was, because I really had no idea how it was going to go or how it was going to be received by teachers. But we'd talked to a lot of teachers, as well as the interviews with kids. I must have spoken with 30 or 40 different teachers, just asked them what they wanted to see in an online program, what they wanted to see in a financial literacy program, how could we make it easy for them. So theoretically, I knew how to present a good program, but of course you never know until you put it out there. So we got 40 schools in 2 weeks, and then we just kept growing from there. We've made it free of charge into schools. Found very quickly that schools didn't have the budget to pay for a non-core subject like financial literacy. Sorry, excuse me. So we made it free of charge and went down the sponsorship route, and very happy to say that we've now got the program sponsored by Milford Asset Management, Loan Market and Forsyth Bar. They all see the value of creating a more financially literate generation of kids, and so they've got them behind us, and they pay us to present the program free of charge into schools. So we basically went through those steps there. We're still refining the program. Alex keeps telling me to stop refining it and just get out there and sell it. But of course, you always, as a creator, you always want it to look better and be more. So the last 3 years have been spent promoting the program here in New Zealand, but also offshore. As I mentioned, so we're in over 700 schools in New Zealand, 50,000 students. That represents 44% of schools with year 7 and 8 students. So we're really happy with that. I was going to be happy if we got to 40 and thought that was ambitious. So really pleased with the schools that we've got the program into. You'll recognise some of them there. We're in 30 schools here in Christchurch. Apart from the ones I mentioned earlier, we're in Casebrook, Māori Hau Intermediate, Waltham, Apawa. We're right around the city. Interestingly enough, I haven't been into a single school to sell the program to. I've done it all through email. So that's our trajectory in terms of student numbers since we launched. The blue line is the number of students. The red line is the number of parents that we've engaged with through the student parent modules. Excuse me. Great time to get COVID, isn't it? So where are we going to from here? We always intended it to be an international program. The English-speaking Commonwealth countries are obvious targets, given that they have similar financial and legal systems, and so we launched the program into Australia, South Africa, as Paul mentioned earlier on, and the States. Those are the dark blue countries. Somehow New Zealand got dropped off there by the map. New Zealand's just a given. And so the next countries we'll be targeting will be India, the UK and Canada. How are we getting there? We do it through a range of different ways. In South Africa, we have a distributor. There's a company called My Life that are just as passionate about teaching financial literacy to kids as we are. And so they're promoting the program into South African schools for us. We have a bunch of different resellers. They typically, excuse me, they typically tend to be other digital resources that are being used by kids or by schools that are complementary to financial literacy. So there might be math programs or social studies, or we have one Indian company that does career advice. They're like a career stepping stone for school leavers, and they think that all their school leavers should have strong financial literacy before they leave school, and so they've incorporated Money Time into their list of resources that their students can have access to. In countries like the States and Australia, the state education departments or district education boards have a big say in what programs are used by the schools. Sometimes the schools sort of take notice of that, other times they don't. So we do have to do a whole bunch of work on courting the education departments. I'd have to say here in New Zealand, the Ministry of Education has been spectacularly unhelpful. Financial literacy is in the curriculum. The curriculum does require it to be taught, but it's silent as to where, in terms of what subjects, social studies, math, or even a standalone subject on its own, and they're silent on how. And so they've left it up to teachers to make their own decision about how they teach financial literacy. The Education Department is reviewing, or the Ministry of Education is reviewing the New Zealand curriculum this year, and it is my fervent hope and desire that they really take a good hard look at what they think is important to teach kids, because I don't know about you, but I got taught a lot of really irrelevant stuff at school. We didn't learn anything about financial literacy, we didn't learn anything about relationships or health or nutrition or mental health. And I think these are all really, really important life skills. And a lot of kids aren't being given these skills. A lot of them are growing up in single parent families, and often that parent has to work. They come home exhausted after work. They haven't got a lot of energy or time to spend with their kids, teaching them basic life skills. Even in your normal, conventional families, I think parents just sort of assume that kids know these things. There's often not a conscious thought process, oh, my child needs to know financial literacy, or my child needs to know about relationships. And even if I do recognise the need to know, how do I teach them that? How do I teach them what a healthy, loving relationship should be? And hopefully we're modelling that, but it's not always easy to do, and it doesn't always happen. So I think the Ministry of Education should take this opportunity to take a good hard look at creating a standalone subject called life skills and incorporate those other life skills I mentioned in it. They do it in the UK. They have a subject called PSHE, which stands for Personal, Social, Health and Economic. It's only 1 hour a week, but at least it's 1 hour a week that these kids are being taught these things. So I'll get off my hobby horse about the Ministry of Education. The way that we promote the program mostly is directly. I spend a lot of time as a marketing consultant doing email campaigns. So I have a lot of experience in that. And so, as I said, all of the schools we've got in New Zealand have just been done via email. Just email, find who the right person is to send the email to. That's typically the syndicate leader here in New Zealand, Year 7 and 8 syndicate leader or team leader, might be the deputy principal. So I find out who that person is and then I just email them. And I just send them a series of emails that builds up their awareness and confidence about the program, offer them a trial. 9 times out of 10 when teachers trial it, they want to use it. They carry on using it. So what's next? Well, it's a big world and there's a lot of countries we want to get into, and that costs money. So we're raising capital at the moment to enable us to expand into other countries, and we'll use that money essentially to build a team. Marketing people, sales, admin are the three at the top of the list. And our goals are to be in 10 countries in the next 5 years. We're in 4 so far, so we're in another 10, then 50 countries in 10 years. That's what our ambition is. We always wanted it to be an international company, an international program, so that's what we're going to do. So how can you help? Right at the very beginning, on the first slide, you might have noticed it said educating a generation of, financially educating a generation of kids globally. So that's what we're about, financially educating a generation of kids. I mentioned earlier on that we do have a subscription version for families so their children can use it at home. If you on inquiring, you find that your grandchild or child is not using money time at school, you can purchase a subscription for them, and I'm very happy to provide you all with a discount so that you can do that at less than full price. They're the details there. You go to moneytime.co.nz and use that coupon. But I think probably the best thing would be if I could give the details to somebody and that could go out in a newsletter. Would that be a good idea? Yeah, and then everybody's got the information there. So that's Money Time, what the program is and how it came into being. We're very proud of what we've achieved so far, but I guess when you're looking at the big time scale, we're only just getting started. So thank you very much, Paul, for inviting me along, and thank you, Alex, Paul and Paul, for backing me and supporting me and helping me on this journey. I've really enjoyed it. It's immensely stimulating and a lot of fun, and it's just a real buzz to know that we're doing something that's really worthwhile and is really going to leave a legacy for a future generation.
Just 2 things I want to highlight. First of all, he mentioned Maori schools. It's actually been translated into Te Reo Maori. And also, as my fellow shareholders know, I'm very keen to use the same format, which Neil has so well described, for health, relationships, and well-being. We could do exactly the same thing for those sorts of life skills, which Neil has already mentioned, and I think that will be great. But fantastic, Neil. Questions? Going. There's somebody right at the back. Would you like to get the other one?
My name's Janet Weber. Paul answered my question about the Te Reo. The other question was, you used someone's program to help build your own. Is anyone else putting out stuff like this?
Yes. In Auckland, there's another program, trying to remember what the name of it is. But there is another program quite similar to how we've presented it, and they've specifically targeted, excuse me, at the Māori and Pacifica communities, and they have a digital experience for the kids, quite similar to Money Time, but they also have in-person meetings with parents and students where they all get together as a community and talk about the things that they've been learning in the program. Kids Coin. And they started at the same time as us. I was quite interested to see that their program looked very similar, or in many ways, to ours, and I thought, is that a coincidence? Or I actually do think it's a coincidence due to the timing and just the way that they've structured the way they present things. Internationally, we have some really strong competitors in the States. There's a company called Everfi, which is a massive company. There's another fella called Dave Ramsey. They tend to do their teaching through video, which is a different approach, and that's fine, but it doesn't have the same interactivity as what we can create using Money Time, and they don't have gamification, so the kids aren't actually getting experience in making their own financial decisions. So as far as I know, we're the only financial literacy program, apart from Kids Coin and Banker, that do that experiential learning, where kids actually get to make their own financial decisions within the program.
Oh, yes, I just wonder if I could put a little bit in, please. What? Right. I went to Waitaki High School in Oamaru many, many years ago, and it just makes me think. We had a program there, Commercial Practice, and it probably filled the bill, I'd imagine, in those days. We didn't have computers. We never knew what a computer was or anything. But we did have commercial practice, which really instilled in all those young people at that school, at any rate, how to write a letter, how to conduct business, and et cetera, all that sort of thing. And it was taught by a chap by the name of Frank Finnegan, who some of you might have known, I've no idea at all. The other thing we had was social studies. Now, I'm not too sure, but just a thought, we did a different era, a different age, but there it is.
Yeah, thank you. It would be great if more of those courses were still available. I think in high school, they tend to cover business, if you like, in economics or accounting. So some of the kids that take the kids that take those subjects will get some sort of exposure to the theory, but in my experience, they're often not based in practical terms. And so learning how to write a business letter, for example, is probably not covered. It's more like inflation and exchange rates and interest rates and that sort of thing, rather than actual hands-on, what does a business letter look like? So I'm all for practical learning. I really don't understand why kids have to learn calculus or the history of the Tudors or yes, it teaches them how to learn, and they have to be able to present their work in a neat and ordered way, and perhaps make an argument for something or present something in a positive light. But you can do that with life skills. If you want to do history of the Tudors, do it at varsity or online.
Me? Thank
I've
you.
got
Thank you
nothing
very
against
much.
the Tudors.
Neil, I want to applaud what you're doing, but I want also to counter some of the comments you've made. What you are doing is absolutely exactly what we intended when the curriculum was being developed and put into place. Because you see, it's not directed by the Ministry of Education. The curriculum is to initiate young people, as you quite clearly illustrated, into the realms of knowledge that cannot be left to chance. And all that you have commented upon this morning is already there in the curriculum, but what you are providing are the tools to deliver the curriculum in the areas that you're talking about, in managing money, in relationship skills, The teachers need to have the programs such as you're developing in order to put together how they're going to deliver what the curriculum requires. So keep it up. You're doing exactly what was intended, but you've got to work with the teachers and the schools and the associations of various teacher groups so that it is available and contributing to children's knowledge.
Thank you. I knew there'd be the teacher in the crowd.
Yeah, kia ora. Peter Gordon's my name. And you threw away a line which I really object to. I'm a calculus teacher and loved it. I'm very proud of the fact that I taught calculus.
Because I'm really stirring the pot, aren't I?
Engari, I do applaud your project. I think it's wonderful. I'd like to ask you, though, how does it... And the other thing that I noticed, you mentioned that it covers kids from year one, from level, what is it, 1 to 10. What's that called?
10 to 14-year-olds.
No, decile, the decile
Deciles,
thing,
1 to 10, yeah.
which I think's gone out just recently. Anyway, how does it in fact go down with kids in decile 1 who are quite disadvantaged financially, and for whom this is a world that is possibly beyond their dreams?
Yes, that's a really good question. And that's something I really struggled with at the outset when I was writing the program, was how do I make this relevant to as many kids as I can, given that they're going to be on different level ends of that economic spectrum with their families. And so the approach I took was I went down the middle, and I said the average person in New Zealand earns this amount of money. The average house in New Zealand costs this much. The average amount of pocket money that a child in New Zealand can expect on a weekly basis is this amount. And I think that seems to have worked okay. The results are, I actually just did this a couple of days ago, this exercise. There's something like 44% of the users of the program are decile 5 and below of the schools. So nearly half of the schools are in the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum, if you like, and half of them above. And what we find with the results is that it's just as effective for kids at the lower end. They often have more to learn. And so we can make a bigger difference at that end. And I've tried to design the program so that it caters for kids that are less capable as much as kids that are capable. I've erred towards making it simple, taking a simplistic approach to the teaching for the less capable kids, but that have included in every module there's a couple of points or a couple of screens or a couple of questions that are going to challenge the more capable kids.
It's not a question of capability, it's a question of available finances.
Yes. So, as I said, I've tried to make it so we start from the premise that the kids don't know anything. And so it doesn't really matter what their background is, that's going to apply to most kids.
Good morning. This is Phil Silver speaking.
Hi, Phil.
Welcome to Christchurch. I'm glad that you've made such a contribution up here, because they need every bit of help they can get. I'd just like to give you a little bit of history that may help. About 30 years ago, when I was up the Matuki Valley in Otago on my annual holiday, I got a call from a man called Mr. George Gear. Do you remember that name? Some of you, how many remember George Gear? He was Minister for Health for some years. Anyway, he came up to see me to discuss whether or not we should immunise our children against rubella, which is a very nasty condition. Anyway, he arrived, except he got his car stuck in the creek, and we all had to push him out. But he came and delivered his message and said, yes, he's going to immunise the kids. It happened that he didn't actually do it, but he promised to do it. He was talked out of it by his officials because it cost too much. But anyway, the situation was that he'd been talking to us about the Dunedin study, which is studying about 1,000 kids that we've been following for life. And I asked him the question that I always used to ask people, and that is, if you had 1,000 children you were following from birth to death, what would you include in the protocol? And he said, well, I reckon that what is most needed, and this is 30 years ago, is education in how to manage money. And that was his top thing about 30 years ago. So I thought you'd be interested in the origin of these ideas. Have been around for a while, and congratulations. I think you're doing wonderfully well. I really think that it's marvellous. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Phil's son Jeremy and I were good friends at school and university.
Leslie Hunt. I'm just wondering, well, for a start, I'm sitting beside a historian who I'm sure is convinced that history should be taught from an early age. But anyway, I was just wondering what sort of decisions are rewarded within the program? If you get a choice to buy this or this, how do you decide what is a good decision? Because there's more to it than money, I'm presuming.
Yes, yeah, that's a great question. What we do is I've tried to give them the sort of consequence or outcome that they might expect if they made that decision in real life. So, for example, if they transfer money from their everyday account into their savings account, they can earn 1% interest. 5 years ago, it was 3% or 4%, but we change the figures each year so to make it current. If they invest, they get to see the investment go into into shares. They see on a graph that they've invested $10,000, say, and then they see the value of that at the end of each module, and we give them a return at the end of each module that averages the return that they might expect in real life. So for shares, that's 8%. It's not always 8%. And they see that on their graph. Sometimes it's minus 5%, sometimes it's plus 2%, sometimes it's plus 15%. But on average, it's 8%. And every kid's experience is different. The returns are completely random, but within those parameters. So they get to see that on average, if they make a decision to invest in shares, they will earn 8%. And that's money that they didn't have to work for. That's money that they're using their money to make more money, which is ultimately what we're trying to get them to do, is understand that to get ahead, it's going to be difficult to do that on a wage or a salary, unless they're an astronaut. So we're trying to steer them towards investing. We're not prescriptive with that. It's a trial and error thing. It's an experiential thing. They get to see if they invest their money, then it grows, their net wealth grows. If they put their money into a savings account, they get more money in their bank account. If they donate to charity, and we do have an option for them to do that, it reduces their net wealth, but they get a generosity medal if they've donated a certain amount. And we make a big thing about that in the program, because we say it's really important that as soon as you're in a position to be able to give back to people who are less fortunate, then you do. Not all of it, but certainly some of it. So we're not prescriptive. We're not saying these are the best things for you to do. it's a knowledge program. We're trying to build their knowledge. We're trying to label for them all the different parts of the jigsaw, the personal finance jigsaw, so they understand what all the pieces are: insurance, warranties, what security is when you're borrowing money, what compound interest is. We're giving them all the different pieces of the puzzle, and then we're allowing them to put the pieces together into a puzzle for themselves, and they get to see what that puzzle looks like that they've created, which will be different from the student beside them, who's made a different set of decisions, and so their net wealth's going to be different. They've invested in different things. Their avatar looks different. So there's no right or wrong outcome in money time. It's just different experiences, and hopefully they will learn from trial and error what produces the best outcome for them. For some of them, it will be the best looking avatar, hands down, no apologies. That's what's important to them. For some, they've got the greatest amount of net wealth. For some, they gave it all away to charity. And curiously enough, when I was doing the testing in Selwyn House, after I'd been going for about 10 lessons, and at the end of the class, I wanted to ask them some questions, and I said, how many of you have been giving to charity? And they all put their hands up. And I said, how many of you, and I actually had a sneak preview at the results, I said, how many of you have given all your money away to charity? And a third of them put their hand up. They've given it all away. And I was like, that's not exactly what we're trying to get you to do, but highly commendable, but, got to keep some for your family and yourself and stuff like that. But I think that was reflective on a lot of where they're coming from. Obviously, Selwyn House, the parents are reasonably well off, and I imagine quite often one of the parents doesn't have to work and is doing a lot of community work, and so they're seeing that they have a very strong connection with charities. So that's what we're trying to do. We're not prescriptive in the program. We're just trying to get them to learn from their own experiences.
We've got time for one more short question. Thank you.
I'm Andy Shand. I want to say I've been on my own education program with grandchildren. I've given them some sharesies. They've learnt that A2 doesn't always make money, but it's a really good education.
Yes.
I've got two questions as an accountant. What's it going to cost us to give the program for our New Zealand children or Australian children?
Yes.
And you've got a lot of rich people in this room. How do they invest in your company?
Two excellent questions. Thank you, Andy. The program normally retails for $89, but with a 25% discount for everybody here, that brings it down to 67, I think, about 67. And in terms of investing, we're just putting together an investment pitch now. And if you're interested in that, then certainly come and see me afterwards, or you can email us just at moneytime, neil@moneytime.co.nz. We welcome any interest in investing in what we're doing. Thank you, Andy.
Well, I'd have to say you get top marks for marketing. Thank you so much, Neil, for coming and explaining this today. I've followed it closely through Paul and been very interested in what you're doing. You probably, possibly appreciate that most of us here are children of 30s and 40s. So we were brought up in an era of make, do and mend. When you hand-me-down clothes, mothers darned and mended. And what's more, we had at our school post office savings account. We dutifully go along and put money in each week. So, in fact, I think we all got a very good basic grounding of how money worked. But today, unfortunately, today's youth face a completely different tyranny of credit availability, of buy now, pay later, all of those things. So what your wonderful program is doing is giving them a very good grounding, and congratulations for that. We wish you well, and it's wonderful that you're being recognised internationally. We're very proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
you.